Hello. So today I will be responding to Ben Watkins from Real Atheology on immortality. I believe Ben is mistaken on what constitutes a meaningful life, at least his mortality requirement. So I'll be starting at where he gives his second requirement in his discussion with Zach on the channel Adherent Apologetics.
And then the second part, the existential part, what I think I've met with quite a bit of incredulity, the kind of idea that I've been developing over the past year or so, is this idea that being finite, that being immortal, is a necessary condition for living a meaningful life. Why do I say that? It sounds like, because it seems common to all religious traditions that an eternal life is better than a finite life, that an immortal life is better than a mortal life. And I actually think that that assumption is mistaken. I actually think that we can challenge that assumption and say that no, in order for our lives to have meaning, and in order for my life to live my life and to care about it, to be animated in the projects that I do and the people that I love, my life has to be finite. My life has to be something I can risk, that something is at stake, and that my projects could fail, and that it's worth doing just in itself. And so this is where a lot of my atheist peers will
So I don't think one has to be at I don't think one's projects have to or the things that one values has to be at risk in order to be motivated. I I I find this I don't find it intuitive at all. I think there are other things that could motivate a person to pursue projects, like the pleasure that it gives them. That seems like a very big motivator, and while the risk component could certainly motivate a person, it may very well be an extra piece of motivation. I don't think it is necessary. It is not a necessary condition. We're also interested in pleasurable and desirable sensations, so that might be another reason why we would want to pursue certain projects. So let's continue.
cringe, where faith comes in, a kind of mortal faith in this idea that, look, I'm going to have the commitments that I do and engage in the projects I do and love the people I do, knowing that I have to risk them, that I could lose them, that I could fail, that everything could fall apart. And so that it's this kind of mortal faith, this moving towards our death and accepting that we are dependent on everyone around us, but also living our life in relation to our death. If you take that death off the table and you instead put an eternal life there, then I think life becomes meaningless, because there's nothing to animate you. You could postpone.
As said before, something can animate you. It could be the pleasure of the activity. It could also be that your desire to avoid boredom. No one wants to be bored. People always want to do things. Why would I want to postpone my projects if I end up being bored? Boredom is not a very it's not very pleasurable, so and it honestly feels kind of bad. So
All of your projects indefinitely. You wouldn't be motivated to act in any way. In fact, the distinction between a sooner than or later than some moment in time just loses. That distinction just collapses when we think about ourselves as eternal beings. And so I think that could be a very profound conclusion. These thoughts have definitely been.
Yeah, I don't. I'm pretty sure he doesn't argue for this further. How we would lose earlier or later than relations. I'm pretty sure he doesn't uh, give much more justification for that point, but I could be mistaken on that. Um, but I don't find that very intuitive, and any immortality proponent would not find that very convincing, at least on its own. So maybe he does give this justification later on or somewhere else, but I'll just be responding to a few minutes of this video.
Boosted in recent months by I read it's This Life by Martin Hageland, and
No, I've not read that book, by the way. I didn't do any, like, I didn't feel like doing prior research for responding.
he has this theme in his book about how it is our finitude, it's the mortality of life that actually is what gives it meaning, and that if you were to take that out of the picture, meaning would just evaporate, which certainly surprised me when I first started to think about this idea, this conclusion that I had come to, because I had always kind of taken it for granted that, look, if theism were true, God would be the greatest possible good for us, an eternal relationship with an infinite being that we could grow ever deeper within infinitely. Seems like it would be the greatest possible thing for, like, what could possibly be better? But that's that normative feature of the meaning of life question. It might be true that would be the greatest thing of value for it. But then the existential portion of that question comes in. Could we live like that? Could we live in eternity and be motivated to do anything, to take on any sort of projects or have any sort of convictions or even to be agents at all? And to my surprise, I found that the answer to that was no, that it requires our finitude, the acceptance of ourselves as mortal beings, that cause us to care about anything, to be concerned about anything. I'm not going to act unless I'm concerned for something, and I can't be concerned for something unless I admit that it's finite.
I think there are other ways you can be concerned about the things you value. Like I mentioned before, the pleasure of the thing, whether it gives you desirable sensations or desirable emotions, your desire to not be bored, that might also give you a cause for concern for the things you value. I don't know why the finitude of a thing is a necessary condition for motivation, and also let's just grant that finitude is a necessary condition, or at the very least that an object is at risk of ceasing to be. Biological immortality can also give you that risk component, because even though it's physically possible for you to live forever, it's also physically possible for you to die. So if we get rid of like an absolute conception of immortality and instead use mere biological immortality, then we can have that risk component, so we could still be motivated.
Or that it could fail, that its contingency and temporalness and fallibility is what concerns me and motivates me to live. And living taking that leap of faith to live that way with that knowledge is what gives my life meaning. Because I see our shared reality as something fragile and an end in itself. To use the jargon from this is what I get from Kant and Hegel. To see, not because this meaning is imposed on us because of a divine command that we're just obeying, or because we're promised a reward instead.
Yeah, I almost forgot to say, yeah, I know that, they were talking about, like, the context of what he's saying is that, is in the context of an eternal heaven, and so biological immortality wouldn't be applicable to that, but I just wanted to give a possible counter for how immortality is still compatible with a risk component.
Instead of a punishment, but just because they're ends in themselves.
Okay, yeah, so there's a lot of things here, Ben, and I appreciate you kind of spelling everything out.
And then Zach gives his own thoughts on it. I'm gonna have to agree more with Zach. I think immortality would be a very good thing, and it would give you lots of meaning. Now, I think we could, not only can the immortality proponent show that arguments for the rationality of mortality fail, I think we can easily show that immortality is the infinitely more rational option to take. So why do I think this? Well, this gets into philosophy of death literature, but first we have to ask, why is death a bad thing? Well, death is a bad thing because it deprives you of future goods. Were I not to die at that particular time, I would have experienced much more of good life. But because I died at that particular time, death prevents me from experiencing intrinsically good things, which is why death is instrumentally bad. And an instrumental bad would be something which prevents you from experiencing intrinsically good mental states. So yeah, that's why I think the desire for mortality is irrational, and immortality is much better. Yeah, pretty much about it.